Hey there, thanks for stopping by for an eclectic conversation with Millie Hunt Porter about her book, The Horse Gods. Millie's 94 years old, and this is her first Zoom interview, which I'm thrilled to be a part of because Millie's long been a professional inspiration to me for being the one who brought Tom Dorrance's words and thoughts to a greater horse world. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Good morning. We're here today with Millie Hunt Porter, and in my mind, she is the most important equestrian rider that we have in our world, and I'm so excited to be visiting with her this morning. This morning, we're going to talk about her book, The Horse Gods, but she's written numerous other titles, most importantly, Think Harmony with Horses and True Unity, which are titles that many of you will be familiar with. So, Millie, let's visit today about the Horse Gods, and I'm excited to hear about your thoughts about what inspired you to write this book.
Well, when we start there, you mentioned Think Harmony and True Unity. Think Harmony was my following Ray Hunt after he had gotten acquainted with Tom Dorrance and had some new ideas on how to relate to the horse. And then after many sessions and many ups and downs in that, eventually I got to spend even more time with Tom. And all of those things had came before. And those books had been introduced to the public. The Think Harmony book had been introduced clear back in 1978. And then Tom's book came out in 1987. So The Horse Gods was my reaction to some of the misconceptions that had come out about those other two books. So it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to something I thought that was off to such a good start. And then the ideas began to become mutated and changed through the years, which is a natural process. Anything that has growth and spreads as fast as those ideas did are bound to get changed or modified to meet with the needs of other areas and other groups and other thought processes. However, some of it I felt was damaging or disrupting to what Tom had really brought to our attention back in the 70s and was such a blessing to the people in the West who actually were making their living with horses. And it just was so important to react, I guess, as much as anything. And that was, but also it was challenging to even begin to a process like that, to talk to the public.
And so can you talk a little bit about your choice to tell this book from the horse's point of view? What kind of challenges and freedom did that give you?
Well, naturally, it was easier to focus for me. There was lots and lots of different probably attitudes from people, but maybe fewer attitudes from the horse's point of view. and to pick and especially something with long life and like the mare that I picked, to be able to start with her as a horse on the desert in a free life, and then become connected and focused with the family that she became, or the family that she, because there was more than one, gave the opportunity to have a lot of different problems and a lot of different issues that a horse might experience, or a family with horses might experience. It definitely was just from the fact of history, it was in the period of time right after World War II, when so many things in our society were changing fast. As veterans came home, and the GI Bill was there for them, I think that I felt like, in fact, I know quite a few people that went on to higher education, become doctors, lawyers. Quite a few achieved college educations that put them in a different line of work. Perhaps they had been ranch people, farm people, and had not planned. They had planned to live on the land directly, but everything was moving so fast. So instead of just having cities and country, all it wasn't very long at all till these people had gone to college and came back and still had their country roots. And we began to have something outside the city, little acreages with professional people who worked in the city, but wanted to hang on to their country life, their animals, and their relationship with the country. And horses became the horse industry then changed from being just the horses that you were using on the ranch to horses that were being raised and cared for on a 20-acre parcel, or smaller or larger. But the suburbs were suddenly around every city, and it wasn't any time at all till then. There were people that did not have land, but they wanted to have a horse, so they began to buy their businesses begin to be built in the edge of the cities, stables and facilities to house horses. So that it grew so fast in so many states that it was almost like boom.
Yeah.
It was fast. And then a tiny little area that had a stabling for 10 horses before you got turned around twice, had an indoor arena and an outdoor arena and a track and facilities for 30 horses. It was such a fast moving interest in such a fast moving industry. And part of that was the lifestyle had changed. And these people that went back to school were, working in engineering and manufacturing different things, and everything moved so fast. And I remember reading that the difference, the estimated difference in what the government spent on the education of the GIs was way more than paid back in the amount of taxes they paid as they as they worked in their new career and finished that cycle of another 30 years.
Yeah.
So it was a fast moving sort of a situation.
You released this book in 2001, and that is a time where I had experience in this world that we are in now. And so I'm curious how you perceive the changes, or have there been changes in the horse world since you released this book, and your thoughts on that.
I begin to see almost a swing of where I felt like, instead of understanding the gift that I felt that Tom Dorrance had brought to the horse industry, I felt like there was a new knee-jerk reaction, kind of almost overboard. I had a young man real recently call me from the state of Wyoming, and he said he was making his living starting colts for other people, and somebody had criticized him, and he felt bad because the person made it sound like he was doing something unkind or even almost sinful to be making his living with a thing like a wonderful horse. And I went, wow, what a misconception that would be of how Tom related. Tom, of course, was a pioneer family that had a ranch and used the horses to take care of the cattle. And the idea that somebody was doing anything sinful or cruel by making a living being paid to ride a horse shocked me. I thought, what an overdue. What are you supposed to do? Pat him and feed him? Good grief. What a painful existence for a horse if that's all you bought him for. I mean, that was a mind boggler.
Yeah, for sure. And it's sort of sad that he would feel that way.
Well, it seemed far out because, of course, for years, that's pretty much what fed my family. We had four kids, and that's pretty much what fed the family. Was raise work with horses, or in some either directly starting horses for other people, or working for a rancher where his responsibilities called for him to ride.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was part of every day.
Yeah.
As the end of the long hot season neared, the band had to travel further to water. The streams that had been so full earlier had all dried up, and little puffs of dust rose from each step as the herd traveled. The afternoons often brought dust devils dancing through the dry heat. One of the band's favorite watering holes was a small spring up a box canyon. Golden Stallion and Granny Mare always brought them in quite cautiously, The water from the spring was clear and cold, but Granny Mare knew they could pay a tremendous price for it. With a series of large boulders hanging over the spring, it could be a place for a mountain lion to leap upon a fall. In the year before, that very thing had happened to one of the other mare's colts. Even in her very first months of life, old Mama felt how important Granny Mare was to the herd. She was many summers older than anyone else in the herd. She knew the history of their home range. She knew how to find water in a drought and where to go to find the precious last bits of grass. Old Mama remembered coming into the water hole late one hot afternoon. The mares and foals were thirsty and anxious for the water. Golden Stallion and Granny Mare kept them back as they searched the air for any scent of danger. Finally, they were let into the water. How welcome it was as they all drank their fill. A breeze began to blow down the canyon toward the direction they had come, and suddenly it happened. A monster was among them. The band scattered, then regathered, and on a full run they were gone. But the little filly couldn't keep up. A strange thing, thin, snake-like thing had trapped her. First, it had settled easily around her chest, and then somehow she had become wrapped in it. She was so completely trapped that for a moment she stood still, trying to figure out where the problem was coming from. Several times that season, her mama had shown her Man off at a distance. Man was usually busy caring for his cattle, but now she was not only close to Man, she was somehow connected to him. He had been watching the herd's descent from the hill to the water hole. He had watched them several days in a row. He had finished his cattle work early that day and was coming back just as they entered the canyon. The wind was in his favor, blowing out of the canyon. He was mounted on a blue roan Mustang he had caught on Mary's Mountain. Moving easily, they blended in with the sagebrush. He waited for them all to fill, knowing it would be easier to make a catch. It was not an accident that he caught the small sorrel filly. She had 4 stocking feet and a blazed face. She showed the breeding that came from the good stock turned out on open range during World War II. The stock was not so much turned out as it simply was not gathered in. Being short of help, the rancher's priorities had changed. During those difficult times, just getting the cattle cared for was often a chore. If a mare or two strayed to the wild bunch, he was just left that way. When she found herself wound up like a kitten in a ball of yarn, old Mama remembered she had called for her mama. But there was no answering call. There was only the man on the blue roan, the rope, and the one small sorrel filly. A hawk circled above, squealing a protest. It seemed the 3 figures on the ground were too close to her nest. The man on the horseback came nearer and began to move in a circle around the frightened little filly. This seemed to loosen her enchantment, but her freedom dash was cut short. He was using a very long rope, and he could make use of every inch of it. He would wind her in the rope and then reverse it. With each turn of the rope, he moved in closer. He was always in control. He was in control of his horse, the rope, and the little filly. If a stranger had been watching, he might have thought the man could not control the filly so quickly But this man was a determined one. This determined one never thought he couldn't, so he always could. He could just about do whatever he set out to do. He planned to take the little filly home beside the blue roan, and about sunset, he did so. But that's kind of maybe the whole thing is that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's just a wonderful introduction to the whole story, and it's a wonderful to hear you read it.
Thank you. Well, and there were a lot of when I suggest that she could have had a registered parent or a very well-bred, not a Mustang parent, she very well could have, because lots of things didn't get done during World War II on the ranches. I remember Pearl Harbor. I was, remember it coming in on our news, and we had family, we had community, and in our little town, almost immediately there were. I was in school, of course. However, everybody that was after 18 and clear up to 44 was gone. Every bit of help we needed, everything. It was just the teenage kids and the older people, because the other people went to war and they went to be Rosie the Riveter, and they went to do something else that had to do with defense. They were out of here within months, and the rest of us were awful glad when a big brother or somebody came home on a furlough, and we had somebody else to depend on for a few minutes, because we were the big kids, the high school kids, the junior high kids. We were the big kids. And our role was to still be the kids that made the families feel complete and be the big kids for them with all the jobs the big kids left.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
a different time.
yeah. It sounds like a very
And a lot
tumultuous.
of horses were just left to go. So what? Your best broodmares out there. Well, too bad. There's 4,000 other things more important.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's the way it was. And when you read the book, you kind of get more tuned into why the determined one specifically picked that little filly. He didn't just want anything. He wanted a specific horse out there because he was raising horses, trying to pay for a ranch, and one of his very better broodmares that he cared for dearly had lost her foal. And this particular one he roped fit the paperwork.
yes, yeah,
And I tell that a little later.
yeah, yeah.
So, but if you didn't know what I was talking about, you'd read a lot of what old Mama remembers is basic facts on the ranch and in that time of history. And unless you have a little bit of knowledge about it, you would probably read by some of the things that old Mama remembers. That's fact. You would maybe not pick up on them.
Wonderful.
You get a lot of history that you don't really know. It's like, oh, is that what happened? A lot of people have a fantasy that all those Mustangs were all on those hills forever and ever, and have no realization of how many were turned loose from domestic ones, especially during that economical time. And if you look at the pencil work, you'll find there was a lot of times when other times when the rancher went broke, or there's a lot of pencil work that went up and down in the day-to-day living in the West.
Well, and that's what I really enjoyed reading it a time, going back and rereading it, was just thinking about the seasonal cycles and the year where everybody gets sick, and then the winter where everything's peaceful. And I mean, just thinking about the ranch life in those broad strokes.
The ebb and flow of life, and so much influenced by nature, the hard winters or the range fires or all those things that are different in a big wide open space.
Well, Millie, has there been any question about this book that I have not asked you that I should have asked you?
No, no, but it does have some areas where old mama, is explaining some of the things experiences that she has when she's being worked with or asked to perform the different things necessary for the ranch, or necessary, especially when she is asked to go to town to compete in the fair and those kind of horse shows, and that kind of activity maybe brings up questions for people, or it definitely brings up how I watched and observed, and on what little bit I understood about what Tom was seeing in a horse, and introduces the just lately but it shows how it's also interrelated. Something that's true for old mama could be true for in a situation that wasn't even involved with the horse. Now, this is really off base, but I have a new project that this is just between you and me. I have started to have an owie in my hip that makes it so I'm concerned that it's kind of like having a catching in your body, and it feels like, oops, it might leave me. I mean, it might cause my leg to not move right, or cause me to fall. So I said to the kids, I think I'm ready for that upright walker. Now, that doesn't sound like it could be in any way related to old mama's story or anything else. However, I've got this upright walker now, and I am so interested in the fact that if I don't, this field timing and balance is just as important with this new walker. If I don't stand up as straight as I possibly can, and if I put too much weight on the front of that, if my weight isn't right, and I put too much weight on those front wheels, the thing will not lose its momentum on a tiny little pebble. it'll get stuck, and cause me a lot of extra work. But if I keep that front end light, now this is crazy, but I keep that front end light, Emily, I can go right over that pebble. And if my timing and my weight on that thing isn't correct, then it's like pushing a blasted thing. It's like trying to push a horse somewhere. You can't push anything, and you sure can't push that upright walker without your weight and your feel and timing is what gets the balance that's comfortable. Isn't that? How about that?
Well, that sounds like the perfect lesson to learn.
Oh man. And I've had it. I mentioned to the kids that it's almost my birthday, and they called and said, "It's almost your birthday, Granny. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not thinking about anything except getting an upright walker because I've got an Howie that I think might need some help." But I wasn't thinking about the whole picture. Well, in 5 days, I had a walker. So then, I got all these kids, these grown-up kids, and I think, well, you better get your out there and get to walking. And it has made so much difference in how much less pain. I've had so much pain with my back because I injured part of my spine 15 years ago. And actually 12 years ago, but anyway, it was too, I kept doing the same thing. I kept picking up things that was too heavy and doing dumb stuff till finally the doctor said, "When are you going to listen to your body?" Okay, back to listening to your body. I finally did and stopped, but I still had this back pain and needed to walk, but didn't have any way to walk and sit down like you do with a walker. So you'd be surprised, just what a change that's made in my overall ability. Oh, well, I'm not running races, but I'm doing a lot better with the pain, with a lot less.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being in pain is no fun for anybody.
And here I've got this field timing and balance, but there's so many things in life that make me think of Tom. And I hear these other older people say, how tough it is to be old. Well, it is. But Tom's big thing, of course, with the horses too, was with anything. He'd say, "Well, adjust to fit the situation." And he had that kind of old accent, real slow. But anyway, I'm kind of off track there.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. We can all think about ways to incorporate what Tom had to say into all parts of our life.
Yeah, it is. It's not about horses, and neither is the horse gods, except that there is a lesson there, especially determines attitude of always being the horse master, and the rewards that might come to a person who chose to be on a different spiritual level with a horse, where instead of being trying to make something happen, you let it happen and have the harmony and the closeness and Tom would see it too and it wasn't always just, it could be visible in a day-to-day working with your horse. It could be, he would see it and enjoy it in some little kid, around the stables there. When he came by one time, this stable where we kind of all met, this girl she was a pre-teener, 11 or 12. But anyway, she just had a horse that she loved, and it responded to her in a lot the same way that horses would respond to Tom. It was connected, like it wanted to please her, and be a unit that was in harmony with each other, and that is, he felt that it wasn't a state of do something. It was something that's already done, and you have that closeness and that connection and that harmony. And the bottom line in the book is that's the message. It's that message. But and as you read that, I think you get it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that was beautiful, and I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. They want to have that connection so badly,
that they try to force something.
Yeah.
It's not something you force. It's something you feel. Force really gets more people in trouble than anything else if you're going to make something happen. And that might be what the people were trying to tell this young man, but it certainly didn't come, making a living with a horse being, it just was so out of place, or I didn't have a place in my world. I didn't know where to put it.
Yeah.
I still haven't answered this young man because I'm trying to figure out, what are we talking about? Which way did that go? Which way did it go? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah.
When I made the book, I lived in Idaho. And so the state of Idaho said, may we put your book on audio thing and give it out through the library? May we have the right to do that? And because I was living in Idaho. And so I've had some fun stuff. There's a young man in our community who's special to all of us, and he's special, but he never did read much. So he listened to the story, and he was able to tell me one day at church, he sticks up his thumb and says, "Good job." And that was one of my biggest compliments. Oh my gosh, he enjoyed that book. And then another elderly man, younger than me, but elderly, who was losing his sight and had been a rancher all of his life and lived with horses and animals of all kinds. After he couldn't see to read, he got the book from the state library, and thoroughly enjoyed the story from the technical or stuff that is in there that is just about horses and ranching and that life. And he really enjoyed it. So that's the different, like, that's a different spread of, people who could read it and give me some feedback, because and then other people ask me, uh, uh, who was your who was your who were you thinking of when you had this character or that character, because uh, they have names like Capable and Earnest and Wise One and things like that. The people do. And Determined, it was the man who catches this cult to start with. So that's been an interesting uh, facet about the thing, because you can read it on more than one level, but not everybody gets uh, the basis for the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's true of anything.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the first time I read it, I was preoccupied with trying to figure out who was who. And then the second time, I think I just enjoyed the story more for the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, because
Well, Millie, are you working on any new projects? Writing projects?
I'm working on a little bit. Once in a while, I do something that's kind of back in the groove. I enjoyed watching Martin's project out there in Shoofly this last summer and writing a little script on that with the grand. It's
Yeah,
always fun to watch great grandkids.
yeah, yeah, that's amazing. That's so amazing.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, I hope that this visit encourages people to pick up the book and enjoy the story on any level. There's so many levels in this book that I think just about anybody who enjoys horses will enjoy this story.
And it gives you some ideas on how to work with your problem horses. Uh, uh, you know, uh, as far as not fighting with them, just get somebody to help you.
Yeah.
And a horse will, like like that one lady's horse wouldn't leave the barn. They just know they can do that. They're like a spoiled kid, but you don't have to beat on them. You just have to somebody take a hold and say, "Oh no, we're going to do this the other way." And the only other thing, and I don't know if this is interesting to anybody, but I wrote the I wrote the last chapter before I ever wrote the book.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we were out with the horses, and we were out on a piece of property where we had a bunch of horses turned out, and I just got to thinking, and we had all kinds of different horses that I did out there, and I just thought what the different things the horses had gone through and would go through, and and uh, and I did. I don't know. It was just weird, but I wrote I fantasized that this story came to me about the horse. So I wrote the very last chapter, and then I had to go back and have the whole thing happen, and so it was kind of different. We were just driving around out in the hills in the spring, and we had foals and mares out in there, and that was kind of scattered, and then I began to imagine. I wonder what kind of life that old mare had, and thought about the different lives they could have had, and this one. Then, because I had, I guess, some of that life, I went back and started her in Nevada, where I had started. But anyway, it was just came to me that way.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the spring.
That's a time for creativity. That's wonderful.
And I was thinking I wanted to say something to people that didn't understand some of Tom's way with the horse. And so that was how it started, I guess. I know that's how it started. I wrote that chapter, and then I went back and started.
Well, it's a wonderful story, and I'm so glad that you had that inspiration.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And I read it myself again the other day, and I thought, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it is very real, and it's very poignant in parts, and very pleasant and pleasurable in parts, and that's life.
Well, yeah, there's ups and there's downs, and about the time you think, out on a ranch in the West, you do. You have feasts and you're having a good year or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Millie, for the visit. And we'll visit again sometime soon.
Okay. I'm interested to see what you can do with all that.